Hello, Dr. Van Cleve and fellow classmates. My name is Kevin Dodd, and I would like to share with you the experience of visiting Liberty Bell Memorial Museum in Melbourne, Florida. I would also like to share some of the highlights of interviewing a World War II veteran and active community member, JJ, who volunteers at the museum and his church teaching fellow senior citizens. To begin, let's talk about the museum. The museum has an impressive rotunda display showing off many replica pieces of American history in a rotational-like presentation. Covering both military and civilian-like pieces of history, the museum is focused on educating people of all ages about many parts of American discoveries, accomplishments, and historical influence on the world. Right in the center of the museum, there's a replica of the Liberty Bell. This bell was funded and donated by the children from the South Brevard Public School. The replica here in the museum was cast by the Whitechapel Bell Foundry in London. It's actually the same bell producers who casted the original bell in 1751. In addition to the bell, there is a replica of the United States Constitution and Bill of Rights. Unfortunately, the museum didn't have a replica of the Declaration of Independence on display at the time. I'd like to introduce a video now with Paul Harvey as the host, and it's titled Our Lives, Our Fortunes, and Our Sacred Honor. The video is about the signers of the Declaration. Each and every single one of them was affected greatly during the war, and especially because they signed their names on such a document. Some of them lost their families, some of them lost their very lives, some of them lost their property and their future.
We mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. In the Pennsylvania State House that's now called Independence Hall in Philadelphia, the best men from each of the colonies sat down together. This was a very fortunate hour in our nation's history, one of those rare occasions in the lives of men when we had greatness to spare. These were men of means, well-educated. 24 were lawyers and jurists. 9 were farmers, owners of large plantations. On June 11, a committee sat down to draw up a Declaration of Independence. We were going to tell the British fatherland, no more rule by redcoats. Below the dam of ruthless foreign rule, the stream of freedom was running shallow and muddy, and we were going to light a fuse to dynamite that dam. This pact, as Burke later put it, was a partnership between the living and the dead, and the yet unborn. Familiar to you from the several signatures on that Declaration of Independence. The names were kept secret for 6 months, for each knew the full meaning of that magnificent last paragraph in which his signature pledged his life, his fortune, and his sacred honor. 56 men placed their names beneath that pledge. 56 men knew when they signed that they were risking everything. They knew if they won this fight, the best they could expect would be years of hardship in a struggling nation. And if they lost, they'd face a hangman's rope. But they signed the pledge. And here is the documented fate of that gallant 56.
Turning back to the interview with JJ, I'd like to share more of his background. Like I said earlier, he's a World War II veteran who, after the war, just turned out to be your average, daily, typical businessman. He retired in the 70s, and nowadays he spends his time teaching fellow senior citizens about history. He also spends a lot of time volunteering at the Liberty Bell Museum, which is where I was referred to him by the owner. He's currently at the impressive age of 95 and still very active. JJ has come to the conclusion that nothing really is impossible. And so he continues to live his life doing what he enjoys. The things about history that really interested JJ was there's a story behind everything. There's really a reason, a cause, a purpose behind it all. That's why he finds history interesting to learn and also to teach. He likes to investigate. If you remember, during our studies, we read about how some of those at the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia were probably more interested in protecting their investments that they could eventually get returns from if the central government was stronger. Well, something like that. That's a reason that some of them were interested in such a constitution rather than the weaker Articles of Confederation. And so that's why JJ got so involved in history. Before he began, he never really knew how much he was about to learn. He showed me some of his studies, and he's got binders, and I'm talking about thick binders full of information that he's just found over the years of research. When I asked him what he thought was most important about the Declaration of Independence, he he felt that its purpose was to inform the world, not just England, but the world, as to why the colonies and now the United States were about to leave the jurisdiction of the English. The Declaration had a very focused purpose, and it shared with the king what he had done and why the colonies wanted to leave. However, the Declaration of Independence, as influential as it was, JJ felt that there was something else that sort of ignited the passion and the flame within the general population of the people. And that was when Thomas Paine wrote the pamphlet Common Sense. This pamphlet was very influential, and it really just brought the people together. It spoke to them in a language in which they could understand, and that just sort of ignited the flame within the individuals, according to JJ. Something else that was vitally important about the Declaration of Independence was the idea of pursuit of happiness. In the 17 and 1800s, JJ said that people understood that they really had to pursue what made them happy, pursue their, we'll say, the betterment of their future. And in the 1900s, it sort of changed, and people started to expect the government to give them their happiness, and that there was no longer a pursuit that needed to happen. And then moving on, JJ did mention how the Declaration of Independence has a small preamble, but that it's mostly an indictment of King George III, and that it served its purpose, telling the king or informing him the point of view of the colonies. Um, and an interesting side note, real quick, JJ has found sort of rumors, I guess you could say, of a newspaper article that may have influenced Thomas Jefferson in the writing of the Declaration. This newspaper article supposedly has many of the words and influential pieces of the Declaration written in that article. We do know, of course, that Jefferson was a reader and was influenced by John Locke, sort of a European politician from earlier. Moving on, the question that was sort of outside of the box that I had for JJ was, could the critical period under the Articles of Confederation been avoided if the Congress, or really if Thomas Jefferson and Congress, had included more information in the Declaration of Independence? And if that information had been sort of, this is why we're leaving Great Britain and this is how we're going to operate. JJ felt that yes, if more information had been included in the Declaration, then the critical period could have been either reduced or avoided altogether. However, he does point out a good question. How could Congress really have known just what to expect? They had a vision of the future of a free and independent nation, but they did not know of all that was going to have to go into to make that nation and that vision a reality. And then after that, JJ just started to talk about how like the meaning of the Declaration has changed. Uh, we started talking about the relevance of the Declaration of Independence to today's culture. The Declaration obviously hasn't changed since it was signed and sent to King George III, but the meanings of the words have sort of changed. Just as how the pursuit of happiness has changed, so have some of the other words. Uh, the same with the Constitution. Words have changed since the 1780s, or as the Declaration of Independence was written in 76. So the Declaration still has some relevance to today, reminding us of what we had to fight to free ourselves of to become independent from. And as I sort of shared with JJ, it was sort of the Declaration serves as a good sounding board of, to remind us of what not to become. And something JJ shared to finish up with is a direct quote from him is too much freedom can end up with no freedom. And as the world continues to change, we'll see some freedoms are given, some freedoms might be taken, and we'll see what happens.